So then Team Bischoff back in the wrestling land is going to defeat Team Austin at Survivor Series. Austin is now removed as the GM of Raw. And of course, this sets the stage for your return. Dave would write, Mick Foley returned to Raw and pretty much dominated the show on December 1st in Sacramento in a deal that was finalized just a few days before airtime. Foley will be on every show as co-general manager for the next several weeks, building up to the Austin return, maybe even longer. The plans are he will probably appear on and off as the full-time gig ends through March, building to a Mania angle. Foley had pitched ideas for a return for a while, and this idea came up about a week before his return and wasn't finalized until midweek. Foley's been doing some speaking at colleges and has hinted about wrestling Triple H at Mania. Apparently, he'd done that because he had heard all the rumors and thought that there was something to them. The subject came up at Raw, and he was told they have different ideas for Triple H at Mania. And the last we heard, it was the Randy Orton angle, but I've heard other ideas that Triple H has pitched as well. While nothing is concrete, there's a good chance they'll build to an angle for Foley to come out of retirement for a match at the show. Foley's working on a TV project, the details of which were released the same day as his return in Variety. In its first attempt at a TV series by the new WWE Films company headed by Joel Simon, that a pilot has been ordered. Foley and the writer of The Dead Zone have been contracted by CBS to do a pilot where Foley would play a detective in the Tampa Bay Police Department who gets as down and dirty as the criminals he's going after. The show is more of a drama, but Foley's lead character will have comedic overtones. This is the third year in a row that Foley's been a part of a pitch for a TV series.
It's true.
Back in 2001, he was to be the lead in a comedy written by Barry Blaustein for ABC for a show about a retired wrestler adjusting to a new life. ABC changed the head of its comedy division and the network lost interest.
Yeah.
He would also pitch last year, which didn't get great interest from any of the networks. Vincent and Stephanie McMahon are behind this third project and approached Foley with the idea. So, lots to unpack there, as I like to say, but talk to me about you working on this idea that you're going to be a Tampa Bay Police Department.
Man. I used to joke with Barry Bloom about I was taking my annual Southern California vacation, where every year for like 4 or 5 years, but at least minimum 3, where I would get called unsolicited. Barry would call me and tell me a major producer, people with track records, had an idea with me as the lead. And so this wasn't me pitching ideas. This was me going to listen to a pitch and then going to the networks.
How much of that do you attribute to wrestling? How much was Jimmy Kimmel and Today Show? And
oh man, I guess I struck some people in Hollywood as a guy who had potential. In 2001, I mean, I thought about, my wife and I went to Southern California. We were looking at perhaps buying a home because I thought I could be a decent character actor. I thought I was somebody who could work regularly because I was coming off a good run. I had a name. And I thought I had some, theatrical skill. And I think if people go back and they look at the little bits and pieces I did, that I was pretty good in some of those things. I never saw myself being a star. And I really was surprised that every year somebody felt like I was that star. But I thought, man, I'd be foolish to not go out and investigate. So I would hear their pitch. They would convert me into a believer in the project. And then I was very good at pitching in rooms. So when I would go and I would meet the heads of networks for 3 or 4, maybe 5 years running, we would have varying degrees of success. In the one case, we had an offer for a script when we got into the parking lot,
wow,
which is like insane. And then, like you said, there was a turnover, and the new person probably heard there was a wrestling project and it didn't want that. Yeah. 2000, another one, we went to pitch the idea for a scripted show and was asked by A&E if we wanted to do a reality show. And that turned out to be Wrestling My Family, which made it to pilot. We all felt like it was going really good. When I was asked about doing a reality show, I said, now the only thing you had to gauge it on was the Osbournes,
right, the
Anna Nicole Smith show, and I think the Newlyweds. And I said, well, we don't really yell or fight in our family. And I don't curse at all, right? Just the one F-bomb on my on my shows, right? How many times has DDP dropped an F-bomb at this juncture.
He uses it like a comma.
Right,
so
exactly.
We'd be 40 deep by this
Yeah,
point.
40 deep, and Jake's chipping in, right, using his, like a comma as well. And they said, the guy looked at me and says, we think that's passe. We are ready for a new type of family on TV. So after 2 days of shooting Wrestling My Family, Marcus Smith was the name of the guy who was a showrunner, which is director for the Osbournes, and the Anna Nicole Smith, says their only fear is there's not enough friction in the family. And I was like, but they said they didn't want that. And I later commiserated with Dee Snider about this as well, where he had a pilot, same thing. They said there's not a friction. You're like, there is friction. It's just a little more subtle. So that if you notice, then Dee, when he finally did have Growing Up Twisted, they would begin the show with a major conflict.
Yeah.
Like, you have to have
There's a formula.
Right. And at that time, almost everything we did was completely organic. Of course, they're putting you in situations, but everything you say and how you deal with it is completely organic. We really thought we had a winner on our hands. And then when they came back to do some reshoots, it was like, okay, this is what we want you to do. This is how we want you to react. And it lost a little bit of that. Eventually, they passed on it, but we had a great time doing it. We really did. To have the family together for a couple of weeks, as would be the situation in Holy Foley. We loved doing that show. This time we were together longer, 10 weeks. It was we were compensated nicely for doing it. But going back to what you're saying, I had a lot going on.
Yeah.
And I didn't say no because you never knew. But at the end of 4 years with some really good ideas, with some really good people, I said to Barry, Barry, I don't want to star in a show. Can't you just find me a show that needs a wacky neighbor and let me be on, let me be that guy who's on, looking over his fence, waving every 3 episodes. So I never felt like I was never the guy that a company was built around in wrestling. I didn't see why I would be a guy that a show was built around on television.
So creatively, when you had been doing these speaking tours and saying, maybe it's Hunter at Mania, and is this the timeline where you visit with Vince and pitch winning the Rumble? Right before you come back in December, when they're saying, hey, fine.
Okay.
So late November is when that would have happened in theory?
Yeah, probably because Rumble was coming up and I wanted to win that.
I want to ask, I don't mean to cut you off, but when you laid the pitch out earlier of, hey, I want to come back at the Rumble and I want to win it, and then I want to unify the titles and I want to win that. Were you saying that sincerely, or did you say, I know he's going to say no to something?
No, I thought he might go for it. Yeah,
okay.
I thought I could be a...
I just know sometimes the idea is, let me throw something out. I know he'll say no, and then it'll be easier to say yes to the next time.
I thought he would say no, which is why I had the plan B lined up. But what I wasn't counting on was just how little time it took him to decide he wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. He wasn't like, well, let me take some time to think that over. I have absolutely no idea whatsoever, no interest whatsoever in doing that. And I went, okay, got a plan for Randy Orton.
It is interesting to think, what that might have looked like. We wouldn't have got the Chris Benoit moment, but I think Eddie Guerrero was champ.
Yeah.
So it would have been you and Eddie, and I guess Hunter.
No, because I would have unified it. It would have been me.
Yeah,
out
just
there
you
with
at the
confetti
end.
coming down
of course.
at the Garden. Yeah.
Get out of here. Yeah. So you're going to be here building up the Austin return as the co-general manager. But the idea that you're going to play this detective for the Tampa Bay Police Department, Meltzer sort of gives credit in saying that Stephanie and Vince brought it to you. So did a TV company or production house approach them with the idea?
No, at the same time, in the same time frame, Vince approached me about playing a role in Animorphs with Willem Dafoe. And wanted me to be the lead heel. And I didn't think I could credibly be a guy who disappears into a crowd. And so I ended up playing a much smaller role. I do not remember Vince and Stephanie pitching a TV show to me. I do remember Vince pitching, his daughter-in-law, Marissa, was producing Animorphs. And so I did go in, I had fun, had a great rapport with Willem Dafoe, had a cool, memorable lunch with him. and got to see him act, which was so interesting because we're used to those larger-than-life facial expressions, that I'm used to Mr. McMahon displaying fear by going,
He's so nuanced by
big
comparison.
big gulp of fear. And now I'm watching Willem Dafoe. I'm watching 20 takes of a guy who doesn't appear to be doing anything in the scene. And then when you see it on playback, he's got all these little nuances and subtleties that show up on the screen. And so it was like just getting paid to do an act, to go to acting school. It was fun.
Well, you said you had a memorable lunch with him. What was memorable?
What was memorable about it was, he wasn't a guy that stayed in character. I remember saying to him, I was like, all right, I'm not going in to ask this guy about being the Green Goblin. And I said, Willem, do you mind if I ask you about a role? He went, yeah, I'm sure. And I said, how much did you have to get into character? Like, was that difficult to get into character for Shadow of the Vampire? Shadow of the Vampire is this great movie, but not a widely seen movie. He started talking to me about that, and he'd also played a boxer in Auschwitz in a movie. So I asked him about the training for that, and he was very open to discussing it. WWE shows up with their film crew to do an interview with me and Willem, and they asked me what my favorite Willem Dafoe role is. And I said, I think when he played Sergeant Elias in Platoon, I said that relationship with he and Tom Berenger's Sergeant Barnes, I said, one of the great rivalries in cinematic history. I said, the point where Sergeant Elias gets shot and the way he goes down, I said, he opens up his arms. I said, I think the little biblical reference in there. And I think I see in the background Willem Dafoe go like he didn't know, he was impressed by my knowledge. So when we sat down for lunch, it was me, Willem, and a lady who played an extra who came from a theater background. And we got off on talking about Last Tango in Paris.
Oh, wow.
And so I asked Willem, I said, did Brando just have such clout that he could do anything he wanted? And then Dafoe starts doing dialogue from Last Tango in Paris, which is one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Yes.
And there's
super controversial.
Super controversial at the time. I remember my parents talking to their friends, the Meekers, and Harry Meeker said, "Guess what movie we went to see?" And my mother went, Last Tango in Paris. No, you didn't, and they were joking around about the stick of butter, which I later found out later. But there's pig noises and a pig farting, and somehow it's supposed to be sexy. And so he was doing this dead-on Brando, and he was just a super cool guy who didn't give off any air like he was bad. He didn't have his own dressing room. He did have a trailer he could have retreated to, but he ate lunch with us. I did 20 takes with one of the best actors in the world.
Wow.
And I went my way.